I've been making films since I was very young, and going up through school, it was always the thing that I knew I wanted to do. At university, I did a video production degree, then that followed by a film and TV masters at Bristol University. And since then, it's always been shorts and commercials. The Line was based on real experiences I've had recording corporate voiceovers. The film did really well in festivals and landed a Vimeo staff pick, which was really encouraging. Our latest film is The Storm. So this is a very different to anything else we've made before. The Storm is about a family trapped in a caravan during a sandstorm. The twist being that the sandstorm is happening in the British countryside. So it's about a group of people trying to come to terms with something which really doesn't make any sense, and dealing with the possibility that one of them is missing, potentially hurt. Really short, neat little 6-minute runtime, lots of visual effects, highly stylized. And hopefully as a piece of drama, we think it's got a lot of promise.
When it comes to scene continuity, I think it's probably the most vital part of the color grading process. If you're seeing a person or a place, an object, and it's reoccurring in different shots in different scenes, it's really vital that it looks the same each time it comes back, because your viewer will actually pick up on it, potentially subconsciously at first, but it will often be enough just to kind of let them drift away and not really sit up and pay attention to your narrative or whatever the kind of essence of your film is, because you're just starting to lose them a bit, because in the back of their mind they're kind of noticing these shifts. Maybe it's, you know, the colors of something shift, maybe the contrast of something shifts. You need to kind of nail both those things so that similar features will be in the same place each time someone comes around to seeing it. There aren't many tutorials I've ever come across where they kind of delve into scene continuity, and I think the reason for that is it's not a short kind of light fluffy topic that with instant kind of obvious benefits come the end of it. It's certainly nowhere near as sexy as dropping on some creative LUT and transforming log to, you know, orange and teal or something like that. But in fact, it is the backbone of any grade. It really is something that you spend a huge amount of your time, a large proportion of your time doing. And the reason why it's so vital is because you will lose your audience if you are not constantly and consistently feeding them images that match. We're very good at it, particularly when things are appearing side by side. We're incredibly good at discerning differences to the point where actually you could almost kind of calibrate a monitor almost by eye sometimes, certainly if you're in a hurry. There are plenty of times where I've delivered something to a client and I will check just on what I know is a good quality reference, like a high quality screen on like an iPad Pro or something like that, and just eyeball it with my reference display. And actually, you can do that. We're very good when things are side by side. As soon as you split things apart, we're actually really bad. So you can get away with more. So if it's a shot that appears at the beginning of an hour-long film and then, it reappears an hour later, you probably can get away with a little bit of variation. If you think of classic coverage in a drama, where you've got your, two-shot, a wide, and then you've got your over-the-shoulder, and then reverse over-the-shoulder, and back and forth, and out and in, you're essentially every other shot seeing the same shot again, and you're seeing it with people who are in the same scene, sharing the same light, sharing the same color of light and intensity of light and the contrast of the scene. And so actually in those situations, we're really good at spotting when there are variations. And when I come to grade this in earnest in the coming weeks, I will do my primary grade, I will do my secondary grade, and then I will be making sure for probably hours that this short film is absolutely consistent as I go through. And I'm going to share with you now a few tricks that I will use to ensure that that takes place and make sure that I'm matching these things. So one of the first things that I would recommend is that you go through and you organize your timeline, your footage, so that you're grouping together as best you can all the shots that match together. So all of over the shoulder of Actor 1, then all of the over the shoulder of Actor 2, and then all of the wide shots. So just group them together so that you can treat them in isolation, which sounds counterintuitive because I've just said you need to make sure that as you jump back and forth, you see the consistency as well. If we clear everything away and just left with one shot, then it's not quite the same thing. But actually, by doing that first, you can ensure continuity of the same angle, then ensure continuity with another angle, and then bring them side by side and do your final tweak to make sure that they occupy the same world and they live in the same scene together. And that compartmentalization of this process makes it a lot more bearable and quicker and less stressful. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. Again, DaVinci Resolve, being a dedicated color grading package, has tools within it to allow me to do this. You can definitely kind of do this in editing packages. It might be that you organize your bins this way or use a naming convention to make it quicker and easier to work this way. There is a new feature in Premiere that lets you kind of reference your playhead and another spot on the timeline. Then they're nowhere near as flexible as what I need to do actually for continuity, and this is where Resolve is kind of really showing off what it's capable of. So I'm now going to go through and just spot similar shots, and I'm going to group them together, because obviously during the edit those are split apart as you got from one character to another character, and then he said and she said and back and forth. So obviously they were shot in batches, and then we've split them apart for the editorial. Now I'm essentially putting them back together in batches to work on them in a group at the same time, and that's exactly what it's called in DaVinci Resolve. They're called groups. So if I, for example, take here, I've got 3 shots, all shot probably at similar-ish time, certainly the same setup. If I just group those together, so I'm just selecting all 3 of those clips, I'm going to right-click and I'm going to go and add into a new group. So I'm just going to give this a name. I'm going to call this character A and click OK. And we can go through and we can group all of those so that we can work with them simultaneously. And you can see a little link there just showing that those are now part of a group. Where this gets really useful is once you've gone through and you've organized all this stuff, you can actually change it. So if I click up on clips, at the moment it's showing me all my clips, but I can go through my groups and filter out. So now I can start to kind of deal with this set of images, and because they're all the same, I'm going to be able to spot differences much more quickly than if I was going back and forth and back and forth, for the same reasons why your viewer will spot continuity errors if they're close together. So this is part and parcel of organization in the setup for continuity.
For the storm, light was really important in sort of communicating what was happening, because at the start of the film, you have the main character opening a set of curtains, and the view outside is blocked off by this wall of sand that's being, turbulent sandstorm immediately in the vicinity that's restricting the view to the outside. So it was really important that, and obviously the sandstorm is all created in CG, but it's important that the light created the sense that this was a physical thing in the environment. So we wanted this kind of like nice kind of orangey kind of alien-like glow, because this is a weather phenomenon that has no business being in the British countryside. So, and we had like fluctuations of light, small lightning flashes. When you've got such a small space being lit with such a strange ambient tone, I think that just makes the scene and the drama feel like uneasy. And when the characters are trying to react and figure this out, I just think that strangeness adds to the drama of the situation. And then when things transition and things feel normal again, there's a bit of elation that kind of comes with that sort of serves the narrative really well. So yeah, that's why light and color can play a really integral role in the drama you're trying to create.
So now I've gone through and I've organized this stuff into groups. The question is, well, where do you start? And one could argue it doesn't matter, but I would argue actually it really does. And what a good decision I think to make early on is to decide what your kind of master shot is. And normally that's going to be your widest shot. So in this little scene here, I've got these 2 shots. I'm actually going to go to a group here, and we've got this 2 shot. The reason why that's useful is because I can see both characters in their environment lit for both of them, so that when I cut in, I can cut into him or I can cut into her, and character A and character B should then match the wider shot. It's just a really good way of making sure that you're kind of staying true to the wider image and then recreating that as you go in, and you've got all the information that you need. So that's why I'm going to start with the 2-shot group, which I've now flagged and filtered at the top here, and I'm working with just this small little selection. I'm going to start with this shot here. You can see the lighting changes quite considerably. In production, it could be like a day, it could be a year between these shots being recorded. They're very different. Who knows? Maybe they've gone to lunch and the lights got moved. There's a clear change between them, and I can see that with my eyes. The first step, as ever, is to do your primary grade and then to do the work on the continuity after that. So once my primary grade is done, I can I've got my bedrock to move on top of. So I'm not going to fall into the same trap. As I've discussed in the earlier lessons, I'm going to treat this the same way. I'm going to get my contrast looking good. Based on this group of images and based on what I'm looking at in the scopes, I think that we need to definitely darken this first shot, and I think probably this shot's a bit too dark, so this one in the middle is probably a good kind of base. I think that's much closer to the vision that the director has for this scene. So identifying what's going to be my kind of lead shot that I'm going to colour first and match others to is definitely a wise decision. So I'm sort of initially grading these wider shots, and then within them I'm grading the shot that's closest to what is ideal and what the client wants, and then making the others pull up. So as I said, it's always compromises, but they're compromises so that you're pulling things in and you're kind of straightening things so that you get this clear thread of continuity later on. So with this in mind, this first shot here, I'm just going to run through, and what's interesting is because this is shot raw, I have the ability to tweak the raw information rather than using the destructive color tools that come later on, which are all working on the non-raw, the kind of the what comes after the raw image has been debayered. So by having the opportunity to tweak the raw stuff first, I can get ballpark non-destructively before I start the more destructive elements of secondary work later on. This has a specific name. It's known as a one light. Some people call it a first light, and it's a pre-primary. And it's a really great thing to be able to do a non-destructive grade before your primary on raw footage, because there's literally no penalty whatsoever. So there's so much latitude in this stuff. If I come into the raw settings here, and there will be raw settings pretty much in all of your programs. In Final Cut Pro, actually, they don't distinguish separate raw parameters. They essentially are always using the raw, so you just grade as normal and you know you're accessing the raw files. In DaVinci Resolve, this separate raw section is where you can go in and you can change things like your color space and your gamma, and you can retweak your color temperature and all that sort of stuff non-destructively on the raw footage before you carry on working throughout the rest of the program's suite of tools. So with this image here, I'm going to tell it to open up the clip settings by just decode using the clip settings. I'm not going to drill down into the color space and gamma right now. Okay, I think that's something that we need to discuss in a separate lesson and kind of get to grips with what those things mean. So for now, I'm going to start off by just getting my exposure broadly in the right area. I have an exposure control here. I definitely need to kind of shift up some of the skin tones and some of the kind of main interest, which is all in this mid-tone area. So I'm just going to shift the weight of the image up, but at the same time, I'm going to just make sure that those shadows stay nice and low. You can see if I pull that up, you can see all that detail there. This is the, as I say, the benefits of RAW, it's all there. If I go too far, obviously I'm going to start crushing that out. So I'm just going to try and kind of get, as before, so that our blacks are just sitting on 0, so that we don't have a situation where too early on I've kind of restricted my signal later on by crushing out detail where I didn't want to. Let's bring my exposure down a bit. There's some bright something or other. Oh yeah, so we've got some specular high. I've just arbitrarily brought this really down so I can just isolate what's going on. And I've just spotted, so we've got these bright specular highlights in the bottom right-hand corner, just some little pings on there, like there's a chrome coffee mug and some, there's a cruet there, salt and peppers that are made of glass. So those things are just pinging. Those things are going to clip. Actually, we've got that data, it looks like, in the signal because there's so much latitude in this footage. But you can see the rest of the image really kind of crunches down, and then it's going to look weird if I start bringing the shadows up. So I'm actually going to allow those things to clip. I'm going to find something else that should naturally be falling at that kind of upper level. We've got the green screen in the background. It's actually visual effects heavy, this short film, and typically you wouldn't grade before the visual effects have been done, or at least you would do it in conjunction with the visual effects artist. We've kind of rushed this through so that we can make sure that we're working with it for this course, but later on all of that visual effects work will have already been done and we can actually grade this properly. But for now, I'm just going to raise this up until we're sitting comfortably in that sort of upper third, and then we're going to make sure that those shadows, as I say, are kind of down here. In terms of color temperature, there's something quite interesting that I know Sam, the director, was trying to achieve with this, And so he's communicated with me that he wants to retain that look. So they've gelled their lights to give everything a wash of this kind of straw colour, because they're meant to be in like a sandstorm. This is what the green screen is going to be replaced with afterwards. So this isn't going to be a case of me getting the skin tones looking accurate and black's black and white's white. Having said all of that to you in the previous lesson, this is a very specific incident where we need to stay true to the light that was gelled on set. So the actual look of the orange we've got here, if I look at it at the vector scope, is pretty well saturated. Let me just full screen this for you so you can see it a bit more clearly. It's pretty strong. It is, exceeding 50%. So just to kind of keep that relatively safe, I'm just going to bring my saturation down to a slightly more kind of comfortable 40%, something like that. So when I say 40%, remember the middle of the vector scope is 0. At the moment, I'm on 2 times zoom, so the outer edge is 50%. So I'm kind of just around about 40% at the moment. And another thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to just tweak the color temperature just to bring that round a little bit, just so it's kind of nosing a little bit more over towards yellow, because I know that he was keen for it to not appear too red. So I'm actually going to set the color temperature to 5000 Kelvin, which is just bringing it around a bit. Tint wise, I don't think we need anything in here. I'm pretty comfortable with where that's sitting. Another thing I can tell is there are clearly areas that are desaturated and falling in the middle, because there they are on the traces. If shadows were contaminated or anything like that, we might see big kind of parts of this vector scope veering off in directions, and it doesn't look like that's happening, which is good. So that means all of the colour that I've got in this image is naturally falling in from the coloured gels that were placed on their lights, which is exactly what we want. Let's shrink that down a little bit so I can carry on working. So let's say that this is kind of like a safe contrast and colour starting point. I now need to make sure that I can replicate that on these other shots. So I'm going to take a still. So Resolve calls these stills, they're essentially snapshots of this clip on the current frame that I've sat at, and that allows me to then compare that snapshot to the other clips and see where there are variations and where there are differences. So I'm just going to grab a still from that, and that's just going to load that up into what we call the gallery, and I'm going to go to the previous shot and load that still up. So I'm actually now doing a side-by-side, which is a bit confusing because it's more or less the same camera position. So it almost looks like you're looking at the same shot, but you can see here the break. Remember, we're very good when things are side-by-side at eyeballing these things. I've used the scopes to make sure that my master shot, my first shot I graded, is where I want it to be and where the director wants it to be. I can now use this split screen to eyeball the differences, and with support from the scopes where I'm unsure about how things are going. So I'm going to come back into my RAW settings here. I want to do as much of this as I can to get close in the RAW so it's non-destructive. And let's go back, remember, contrast first. So get our waveform back up. And in fact, let's change this to Luma so it's a bit easier for me to see. Let's go to the next clip. So you can see here, if I kind of compare like for like features, we are quite a bit darker at the top of the frame, but actually at the bottom of the frame it's not that different, which is interesting. So what I need to try and do, there's a lot more light falling on the ceiling of the caravan. So this is kind of, the light has changed, which is always tricky to deal with. So I think I definitely need to raise up that area. It's also becoming increasingly clear as I split screen this that the colors are quite green in the earlier shot here. But let's focus on contrast. So I'm going to just grab my exposure and I'm just going to ride this up and try and place the green screen at a similar value. And let's bring these shadows down and try and place those so they're just matching the other shot. I think we just need a tiny bit more in terms of brightness. And I'm really getting to the point here where I can clearly see the comparison between the two shots. I'm not far off. I think I probably actually need to just ease that off a bit and ease that back up a bit just because it's just make it a little safer. I can do the rest of the work once I'm out of the raw tools. Let's go to our color temperature. Let's start off just dialing in the same temperature we had with the other shot and see where that gets us. And let's go to our Yeah, let's do this in the vector scope. So if I make this bigger, we just go to the, let's stop playing the still. Let's go previous clip, next clip. You can see really clearly, I mean, this is what's lovely about these tools. I can really clearly see by going back and forth, not only with my eyes, but with my vector scope, that there's a big stretch going out here. So let's go back to this shot. Let's pull that saturation back. Let's go next clip. There we go. You can see we're getting closer, maybe a tiny bit more. And just going to try and pull, there's definitely, I need a bit of a tint, I think, off in this direction. I'm getting there. You can see that we're really starting to pull those two things together. That's definitely more yellow. So we need to move this off towards red.